The world has just witnessed a turning point that did not arrive with explosions, emergency summits, or dramatic speeches. There were no urgent headlines flashing across television screens, yet beneath the surface, a quiet shift has begun, one powerful enough to reshape the future of global manufacturing, trade alliances, and political influence. This moment may not look historic today, but years from now, historians may trace a major realignment back to this very decision. Subaru, one of the most trusted Japanese automakers in North America, has quietly ended production of vehicles in the United States for the Canadian market. For decades, Subaru vehicles assembled on American soil rolled north into Canada as symbols of economic integration between allies. That era is now ending. This move was not driven by emotion, nationalism, or politics alone. It was driven by economics, cold, calculated, and deeply revealing. The decision did not come out of nowhere. It was the direct consequence of trade tariffs imposed under Donald Trump's America First agenda. Those tariffs were promoted as a bold strategy to revive American manufacturing, protect domestic jobs, and reduce dependence on foreign supply chains. The promise was simple: raise barriers, force companies to produce at home, and bring jobs back. But the reality unfolding today tells a very different story. Instead of encouraging manufacturers to expand operations in the United States, the tariffs have made American production more expensive, more complicated, and far less predictable. Steel and aluminum prices surged. Supply chains became tangled in red tape. Long-term planning turned into a gamble. For companies that operate on thin margins and long timelines, so the U.S. market began to feel less like an opportunity and more like a risk. Subaru was the first major automaker to publicly acknowledge that reality. By halting U.S.-based production for Canadian customers and shifting operations back to Japan, the company sent a signal far beyond the auto industry. It demonstrated that protectionist policies do not always trap companies inside borders. Sometimes they push them out. This decision marks the beginning of a broader trend now taking shape across the global economy. Japan, long intertwined with American manufacturing hubs through steel, engines, and supply chains, is quietly reassessing its position. Instead of deepening its reliance on U.S. factories, Tokyo is exploring alternatives, particularly in Canada. While Washington continues to raise barriers and frame trade as confrontation, Ottawa has chosen a different path. Under Prime Minister Mark Carney, Canada has positioned itself not as a rival, but as a refuge. No threats, no dramatic posturing, just consistency, transparency, and long-term thinking. In an era defined by volatility, that approach has become extraordinarily attractive. Carney's government did not wait for the United States to reverse course. It acted. Quietly, methodically, and with strategic precision, Canada expanded trade relationships across Asia. Japan, Malaysia, and China became key partners in a new framework built on stability rather than pressure. These relationships were not designed to generate headlines. They were designed to endure. For multinational corporations, the appeal was immediate. Canada offered something increasingly rare in global trade: predictability. Businesses could plan years ahead without fearing that a sudden policy shift, tweet, or tariff announcement would erase profits overnight. This stability, more than subsidies or incentives, became Canada's strongest selling point. Subaru's move was not an isolated incident. It was the opening chapter of a larger industrial migration. Toyota, Hyundai, and other global automakers began reassessing their North American strategies. Even China's electric vehicle giant BYD entered the conversation. The U.S. market, once considered the global benchmark for manufacturing expansion, now resembled a complex maze of overlapping tariffs and regulatory uncertainty. Economists soon coined a term for this phenomenon: reverse reshoring. Policies intended to bring jobs home were instead pushing industry offshore. The American automotive sector, once the backbone of post-war industrial dominance, was becoming a casualty of short-term political calculations. Canada, meanwhile, responded with discipline. Rather than matching rhetoric with rhetoric, Ottawa focused on building trust. Trade officials opened dialogue channels. Regulatory processes were streamlined. Environmental standards were clarified rather than weaponized. The message to investors was subtle but powerful. Canada is open for business, and the rules will not change mid-game. The results became visible quickly. Toyota's Canadian sales surged by nearly 30% in a single month, not because of flashy discounts or government handouts, but because buyers and manufacturers alike felt confident in the environment. Stability, it turned out, was a stronger incentive than any subsidy. Mark Carney's leadership style played a central role in this transformation. Unlike leaders who govern through spectacle, Carney embraced quiet competence. He understood that multinational corporations are not swayed by slogans or national pride. They respond to clarity, reliability, and long-term viability. Behind closed doors, Carney's administration developed what analysts now refer to as the Carney Doctrine. At its core, the doctrine emphasized smart trade, clear rules, incentives for clean manufacturing, and openness to digital and technological collaboration. Each element was deliberately designed to attract industries seeking an exit from the growing uncertainty emanating from Washington. This strategy came into sharp focus during the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur. Expectations were low. Observers anticipated little more than routine diplomatic language. Instead, Carney delivered a calm but firm message. Canada, he said, would engage with the United States when it is ready, but Canada would not wait. That single sentence marked a historic shift in tone. For decades, Canada had been perceived as America's quiet neighbor, adapting to decisions made in Washington. In Kuala Lumpur, that dynamic changed. Without raising his voice or issuing threats, Carney asserted Canada's strategic autonomy. The message resonated far beyond the room. Within hours of that statement, Canada finalized multi-billion-dollar trade cooperation frameworks with Japan, Malaysia, and China. These agreements focused on clean energy, artificial intelligence, advanced manufacturing, and electric vehicles. They were not symbolic gestures. They were the foundation of a new industrial order. The ripple effects were immediate. Japanese automakers began rerouting shipping flows through Canadian ports. Subaru, Toyota, and Mazda quietly restructured logistics networks, bypassing the United States entirely. BYD announced new distribution centers in Quebec and British Columbia. Ontario saw billions of dollars in Japanese investment pour into advanced manufacturing facilities. Canada was no longer just a consumer market. It was becoming a critical transit hub, a bridge linking Asian factories to North American consumers. Vancouver began replacing Los Angeles as a preferred port of entry for imported electric vehicles. Montreal emerged as a center for clean battery technology. Toronto positioned itself as a financial gateway for green investment. South of the border, the contrast could not have been sharper. American factories struggled under the weight of rising costs and policy uncertainty. General Motors reported losses exceeding $1 billion in a single quarter. Stellantis followed with hundreds of millions in losses over 6 months. These were not cyclical downturns. They were structural warnings. Tariffs, once marketed as a cure for manufacturing decline, had backfired. Steel and aluminum prices remained elevated. Components grew more expensive. Export routes fractured. Investment capital began flowing toward more predictable markets, particularly Canada. The impact was not confined to boardrooms. In American industrial cities, factories operated at reduced capacity. Assembly lines that once symbolized national pride became reminders of policy miscalculation. Workers faced layoffs, uncertainty, and shrinking opportunities. Consumers, too, began shifting behavior. More drivers turned away from domestic brands and toward Japanese and Korean vehicles, attracted by innovation, efficiency, and reliability. The slogan, "Buy American," quietly lost its persuasive power as quality and value took precedence. Globally, perceptions of American leadership began to change. Allies who once viewed the U.S. as the center of opportunity increasingly saw it as a source of unpredictability. Each new tariff announcement projected strength, but revealed vulnerability. Canada's approach offered a stark alternative. By listening to partners, adjusting policy pragmatically, and prioritizing cooperation, Ottawa built credibility. Economists began calling the phenomenon the Great Reversal, a moment when the smaller neighbor emerged as North America's new manufacturing hub. International investors took notice. Capital that once flowed automatically toward Wall Street began considering Bay Street. In boardrooms from Tokyo to Berlin, the phrase Canada-friendly became shorthand for safe, forward-looking investment. Europe, long aligned with U.S. trade leadership, started studying Canada's model as a template for 21st century economic diplomacy. Analysts coined a new phrase, the Carney effect, a quiet transition grounded in trust, data, and long-term vision. The global industrial map was being redrawn in real time. Trade routes shifted northward. Economic gravity followed stability rather than size. Detroit's dominance faded as Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal gained prominence. At its core, this transformation reveals a deeper truth about modern power. In a volatile world, reliability has become the most valuable currency. Loud threats and short-term pressure no longer command loyalty. Trust does. Subaru's decision, therefore, is not merely about automobiles. It is a verdict on leadership, a signal that global markets have chosen quiet stability over noisy protectionism. What began as a tariff dispute has evolved into a redefinition of influence. Canada did not seize this moment through emotional nationalism or dramatic confrontation. It prevailed through strategy, by delivering consistency, cooperation, and credibility, while others shouted, "Canada built." As new factories open, new agreements are signed, and new alliances form, a simple reality becomes impossible to ignore. The economic center of gravity in North America has shifted. The future of the automotive industry, clean energy, and advanced technology will not be built on tariffs or impulsive decisions. It will be built on trust, coordination, and long-term vision. And in that future, one label is steadily gaining meaning across global markets. A label that now represents reliability, stability, and forward-looking leadership.